Sometimes in movies, the best soundtrack you can add to a scene is no soundtrack. There being no music and just hearing the ignition of the lightsabers makes this scene feel so tense. Very few words exchanged between these two, just destiny arriving all the same. I believe it was from the director Irvin Kershner where I heard this, but I believe he said a main point he wanted to emphasize with this fight was that Luke was almost always using two hands and Vader is only using one hand. This subconsciously shows us the skill gap between the two. Then when Vader actually starts trying later on in the fight, he goes back to two hands. Great little detail.
What do you think you're doing?
I'm getting out of here.
You know, Lando did just free them. I get the trust is a little shaky, but they were there when Vader altered the deal and pissed off Lando. Also, let's give credit here for how ballsy this is of Lando. He has no reason to help Han and Leia. Han was just some dude he met a long time ago, and he doesn't know Leia at all. If he turns them over to the Empire, then all is good for him. There was no further mention of Imperial occupation of Cloud City. Even if he does help Leia and succeeds, then Vader out of spite will probably attack Cloud City or something. So by helping Chewbacca and Leia, Lando has everything to lose and nothing to gain, but he does it anyway. You'd think if Chewbacca wanted to, he could have just crushed Lando's neck here. So Chewbacca must have held back just a little to hear him out, even though Lando could barely talk. Fun fact, in the original version of this movie, this was entirely an interior shot. It was the special edition changes that made this look like it's on a balcony of some sort. That's why the characters running through the frame look so poorly lit and frankly looks like a terrible green screen work. And a few shots later, they added windows into this hallway when originally it was just some regular hallway. You can even see Slave 1 right outside the window.
Your destiny lies with me, Skywalker. Obi-Wan knew this to be true.
I love how Vader in this movie and in Return of the Jedi is always talking about Obi-Wan. It highlights to me how much rent Obi-Wan has in his head even after his death. Also, in this one shot, you could see that the platform where Luke would need to fall into the carbonite chamber is raised to the surface, while a couple shots later, it is lowered to the ground so Luke could fall in.
Perhaps you are not as strong as the Emperor thought.
What the hell was the loud banging noise? Luke must have been hanging on those wires for a few seconds now. Did he just accidentally kick something really loud? Also, is Luke aware of what he just jumped out of? Does he know what a carbonite chamber is? Another funny thought I had is what would Luke look like in carbonite? Because when Luke's in there, he fell to the ground. So Vader's plan actually worked. It would just be like Luke frozen laying on the ground and then a giant empty pillar above him. Kind of funny to think about.
Release your anger. Only your hatred can destroy me.
This is a really interesting line from Vader. We know that Luke hasn't trained much, so there's no way he could actually win this duel, but is Vader serious when he said Luke could destroy him if he turned to the dark side? Or was he just saying that so he could bait Luke into turning to the dark side? I don't know how Vader can all of a sudden disappear. Based on this second shot, it appears this little area is just an ordinary hallway, and Luke saw Vader fall down. Did Vader just run away off screen? Was there a lot of fog so Luke couldn't see where he was going? Honestly, Luke's whiffs here are kind of pathetic. Like, these objects Vader are throwing at him aren't going that fast. Also, what is he swinging at? One of the last objects that hits him in the back, and he swings forward. I'm no swordsman, but I've played Fruit Ninja. I'm pretty sure I would do fine. There is a good chance that Vader thought he accidentally killed Luke. That would be a reasonable assumption, right? But the musical cue leads us to believe that everything's okay. Imagine if something more dramatic played when Luke fell out the window.
Attention, this is Lando Calrissian. Attention, the Empire's taking control of the city. I advise everyone to leave before more Imperial troops arrive.
What Lando said is blatantly not true. There is no reason to believe that the Empire would remain on Cloud City after Vader had Luke. So let's analyze everything that Lando has accomplished by saving two people he doesn't really know. One, he probably put Bespin at risk of being under Imperial control. Two, he has started a citywide panic by saying the city's under Imperial control. And three, he has damaged some of his really nice walls by engaging the stormtroopers in combat. I also want to point out some funny special edition changes. So of course, this wide shot of the people of Bespin is all new, but also in the original movie, Lando only says attention once, while in the special edition he says it twice. I know that minor detail is indeed a special edition change. Did you see it? He was there. We just saw Wilro Hood run past the screen. For those of you who don't know who that is, I don't know who he is either, but this dude has a name. Fun fact, the meme around this guy is so real that the little ice cream making machine he is holding was reused in The Mandalorian as the device that Mando has his Beskar in. Pretty funny, isn't it?
We're not interested in the hyperdrive on the—
This entire sequence here is the evidence I use to point out how inept the stormtroopers are. To provide context, a lot of people are pointing out in the sequels how inept First Order stormtroopers were. People would counter by saying in A New Hope, the stormtroopers were not inept because they were given orders to let everyone escape. Fair enough. But what about here? There are no orders that we are aware of to let Leia escape. So what's their excuse for their utterly pathetic performance? I mean, look at some of these shots. Also in this one shot of Chewbacca, not only does the blaster mark on the left here only leave a small dot on the wall instead of a real blaster mark, but the dot doesn't even line up with where the blaster shot hit. And if you go frame by frame on a shot a few seconds later, you can see the blaster mark on the wall is there before the blaster shot even hits the wall. You know how many times a smoke screen from R2 could have been useful in the rest of the franchise? Just one example. When the crew was escaping from the Death Star, it probably would have been smart to smoke the area out so the stormtroopers couldn't see who they're aiming at. Granted, their aim sucks, but my point stands. In this one shot, you can see that the stormtrooper has a blast pack of a blaster mark already on his chest before he is shot by Lando. In this shot, you can actually see the broken window Luke just fell out of. I absolutely love this moment here. Remember how I mentioned before Vader only using one hand? Here he's using two, and you can just see how much he is overpowering Luke. It's not even close. I'll be honest, I just prefer a fight like this with real hard-hitting swings compared to a fight like the ones in the prequels. I love how utterly screwed Luke is here. He just got backed up all the way to the point where he is fighting on an antenna. Vader really cooked here. Also, if you look at the pipes Vader cut, initially he cuts above this little silver portion, but a few shots later, it's now below the silver portion.
You have only begun to discover your power. Join me, and I will complete your training.
We get a little more improvisation from Vader here. So of course his initial plan was to freeze Luke in carbonite and bring him to the Emperor. That clearly didn't work. So for the rest of the fight, he's just trying to beat Luke. Now that he has him against the ropes, he's trying to recruit Luke to the dark side and for Luke to join him. I wonder if this was always his plan and he wasn't going to bring Luke to the Emperor originally. It's interesting to think about.
He told me you killed him.
No, I am your father.
Ah yes, the biggest plot twist in the history of cinema. I just wish I could understand that moment of surprise, because I watched these movies so young that Vader has just always been Luke's father to me, so I don't know what it's like to have experienced that revelation. I also want to share some behind the scenes stuff. When they filmed this scene, the line in the script said, "No, Obi-Wan killed your father," and that's what the actors said. The only people who knew the truth were Mark Hamill, George Lucas, Irvin Kershner, and I believe a few others. Harrison Ford didn't even know until the film's premiere. This line was one of the biggest twists ever because it was kept secret so well.
It is the only way.
Low-key hot take, because criticizing this movie is never done, but having Luke just jump off here and get sucked into a tube is a huge cop-out. This is one of the moments where if it happened in a newer Disney Star Wars movie, people would freak out and call it one of the dumbest moments in the saga. Imagine if Rey did this. The Mary Sue comments would be through the roof. But ignoring that for a second, the more interesting thing here to discuss is that Luke likely just attempted suicide. There is no way Luke planned on getting sucked into one of these tubes. This is why in Return of the Jedi, I never believed for a second that he would turn to the dark side. In the previous movie, Luke would rather kill himself than join the dark side. So, the plot point that Luke just attempted suicide is completely ignored, and it's quite interesting when you think about it.
Hear me. Leia.
So Leia was hinted at being force sensitive all the way back in this movie. I still don't think it was intended for her to be Luke's sister, but teasing her abilities with the force is interesting. I also find interesting that this was never discussed again between the two. Leia just used the force here, and then in the next movie, Luke only tells Leia she has that power because he knows she is his sister. I wonder in an alternate universe if Leia wasn't going to be Luke's sister, what they would have done with her in the next movie. Also, why is Leia in the captain's seat here? Lando used to own the ship, let him fly.
Alert my Star Destroyer to prepare for my arrival.
So two things. At this point right here, does Vader think Luke is dead? Also, did anyone let Vader know that Chewbacca and Leia escaped? Because that's never mentioned to Vader in the rest of the movie.
I'll be back.
I find it funny that Leia kinda kisses Luke here. Although it doesn't look like a kiss, it looks like they did just touch their lips. It's a pretty weird thing to do after she just confessed her love to Han. I love how this movie wanted to add just an extra 2 minutes of tension by having the hyperdrive not work. Glorious.
Did your men deactivate the hyperdrive on the Millennium Falcon?
Yes, my lord.
Good.
Ah, so that's interesting. I love how I've been debating if the hyperdrive was ever fixed by Lando's people, but now there's another theory. Lando told his people to fix the hyperdrive. They did actually fix it, but then Vader's men deactivated it. Either that or Lando told his people to fix it, then they told Lando they fixed it, but really they were threatened to not fix it by Vader's men. This has become one of my favorite conspiracies. How really fixed or broke the hyperdrive on the Falcon was.
How would you know the hyperdrive is deactivated?
So now I'm led to believe that the hyperdrive was fixed, but deactivated by the Imperials. But that leads me to question why the hyperdrive made that same noise here that it made all movie when the Falcon failed to jump to lightspeed. Because before I assumed it was broken, but here it was just deactivated. Is that just the noise the Falcon makes when jumping to lightspeed doesn't work?
R2-D2, you know better than to trust a strange computer.
3PO tells R2 he knows better than to trust a strange computer. But did they not trust a strange computer in the last movie when they turned off the trash compactor?
You did it!
Part of me wants to believe that this whole time the hyperdrive could have been fixed in a few seconds if they just had R2. As if Leia, Han, Chewbacca, and 3PO were all incapable of fixing it all movie, and the real fix would have just taken a few seconds. That's my official headcanon. Also, if you notice in this one shot, 3PO is holding his leg by the foot, but a few shots later he is now holding it by the knee part. I just love the tension here. Even though Luke and company escaped, just the tension in the rest of the Imperials that Vader will kill someone is great. And as I said before, I love that everyone pauses to look at him. Such subtle details that I love.
When we find Jabba the Hutt and that bounty hunter, we'll contact you.
I'll meet you at the rendezvous point on Tatooine.
Interesting. So they must have spent some time on Tatooine before the events of the next movie. For those who didn't know, a year passes between Empire and Jedi, so they must have been planning Han's rescue for quite a while. This is actually the first time we see the Rebel fleet in the trilogy. A great tease for what's to come. And that's the end of The Empire Strikes Back. This is one of my favorite movies ever, and it is certainly my favorite Star Wars movie. Yeah, I nitpicked the shit out of it, but it's still great. Click on the link here to watch Overanalyzing Star Wars Return of the Jedi Part 1. If you don't see the link, the video hasn't come out yet. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to Night the Clod Squad, and I will see you guys next time.